Hey everyone, Brendan here, along with my dog Maple, who's here with me as I sub in for Peter editing this week's podcast. Peter's out on his paternity leave, and that's why I'm editing. So if you run across anything that's a little bit strange or doesn't work, it's probably my fault. Also, just wanted to let you know that this week we had a little bit of trouble with the audio with our guest, Michaela Neff, but I think it came out all right in the end. If you'd like to send Peter and Rachel a congratulations, send him an email at petergamble@signpostin.org. He's going to be out for a few weeks taking care of his brand new baby. Thank you. Welcome to the Back Porch, everybody. It's good to see you or have you with us. My name is Brandon, and I'm the host here at the Back Porch, and I have with me today one of my regular co-hosts, Matt Boland, and a special guest, Michaela Neff. So, Matt, Michaela, good to see you guys.
Good morning.
Hello. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you. Listeners, I'm going to briefly introduce Michaela to you, and then we're going to do some updates. So we're going to kind of ease our way into our topic today, which is attachment theory and our relationship with Jesus. And Michaela is well suited to talk to us about that. She's a licensed professional counselor in Texas. She received a master's degree in marriage and family therapy from the University of Florida. Michaela's approach to counseling is systematic and collaborative. So all of her work is from a spiritual perspective with a Christian foundation. And because she knows firsthand that belief is a powerful force towards wellness, she is really well suited to talk about our topic. This is something, listeners, we've been interested in for a while. I did a lecture on attachment theory and the liturgy, oddly enough, a while ago, and you can find it on YouTube if you want to search around for that. And then it's been something that Matt and I have talked about in various forms at various times. It keeps popping up, I think, because of what we do a lot with Signpost and helping people's relationship with Jesus grow stronger. It just is obviously a close connection, and we've learned a lot. So I'm pumped because I think I have a lot of questions. But before we get there, let's do some updates from the Back Porch. And listeners, again, this is sort of the off-the-wall part. Maybe you get to know us a little better. Maybe you don't. I don't know. Matt, what do you got for us?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but I think the thing that might be most interest to the people who occasionally watch the videos, either on social media or on YouTube, is that I'm going away in a few weeks for a small men's retreat. And during that time, Holly, my wife, has said she's going to paint this room. So this room, which is currently just sort of a catch-all junk room that I've been using to sit in and do these recordings, hopefully will look way better. Although I know my proclivity to just pile things up and not be organized. So we'll see. We'll let the audience be the judge of how well the transformation of this room is in the next time y'all see me.
I love your junk room. It's a great studio.
I was thinking it looks like a normal studio, so I'm intrigued to see what color does for the change of the appearance.
Yeah, I mean, this is the only room in this house. I'm sorry, go ahead, Michaela.
No, it's okay. This is the fun part about working together over Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. All I was going to say was that this is the only room in the house since we've moved in here 8-9 years ago that hasn't been painted yet. It hasn't been touched. And the original owners, this was clearly, they had 2 boys with bunk beds, and this was the boys' room. So it's, boy blue. And anyway, so we'll see the way this looks. I actually haven't even asked Holly what color she's going to paint it. I don't care. She can do whatever she wants.
Well, if it comes back like rose pink, that may be an issue for our.
I should have had more of a say in it.
Michaela, we seem to be getting a little bit of interference. We're gonna try and move forward. I don't know, maybe it's only on my end, but you're lagging for me, so hopefully that will resolve itself. Do you want to give us an update from Michaela? Nobody knows you yet, but this could be a fun way to get to know you.
Sure, it'd be like an intro update, I guess. So in context of that rosy pink I just learned that people call pink crushed strawberry if they want to sound masculine about wearing pink, and I found that hilarious. It
I
came
love
up in
that.
a book I was listening to, and I just thought, I mean, if we're more comfortable calling a rose a spike so we can like it and feel masculine, okay. You know, that was cute to me. I think I am interacting more and more, trying to really cement their sense of like identity. I mean, in this current culture of like what makes a woman, what makes a man. And if we want to just change the names of colors, I'm okay with that. And for those of you who have never seen me, I apologize for the lag we're having that makes us think we interrupt each other. It's not intentional. And downstairs, I hope they don't interrupt us, but we've got two beagle, I was going to call them twins, but they're siblings, they're littermates, and they are adorable and floppy-eared and kind of interruptive. So if you hear noises of beasties, that's what's going on.
Lovely. Well, we will welcome them. We don't mind. I almost brought my dog to the office today for the first time, and I was like, no, can't do that. So, uh, I'm still stuck on crushed strawberry because there's a whole bunch of like meanings to that. Like the color I wear is because I crushed. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that for a while. So I okay here. The I had like 3 updates run through my head after you guys both said things. But this is less an update and just I want to say, first of all, I picked up, Michaela, that you said a book that you've been listening to recently, and you didn't apologize for that. And I just want to like point that out that, like, look, serious people listen to audiobooks and it counts. I'm tired of people saying, oh, I just listened to it. Does it count? I'm like, yes, oh, you read a, so yes, it counts. Anyway, just thank you. Go ahead, Michaela. You were going to say something.
Food for thought about that. I have my undergraduate degree is in English literature, and I keep a log of the books I read just for fun to see how well I'm doing on self-care and reading each year. And I might not be 100% as confident about that because I clarify if I listened to it or if I read it with my eyes. So I don't know if that's more in my own intention. I don't know for sure as we're thinking about this if I'm justifying to myself that it counts, but it was audio, or just a record of whether I listened or right for.
Well, thank you. I'm sure that will also make people feel better too, because it's like I'm not the only. Anyway, that's not an update for me. What is my update? My update is that I have started to enjoy wearing crushed cherry. It's the darker version of crushed strawberry. Found a bunch of like polo shirts at the thrift store the other day, and 2 of them were red, and they've become my favorite shirts. And I don't know. I'm like, I put it on in the morning, and I just feel so much more confidence. I'm like, I look good in red. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that's how I feel. But now it's going to be called crushed cherry because that is so much more masculine. I appreciate that. Anyway, thank you guys. Thanks for your updates from the back porch. We appreciate it. Michaela, let's hope this holds and that this connection works. Because I'd like to ask you to tell us a little more seriously about yourself. Who you are, where what got you in maybe to counseling, and then if you can sort of connect us to attachment theory, how is that something you have connection with or worked with?
Sure. Thanks for asking. I think that even before I knew counseling was a field, I cared deeply that people were feeling well. And I think that being the compassionate, gentle, forward person that I am, I was referred into the field of counseling by people that I was working with, which was surprising to me because I legitimately didn't know it was a field. And that probably comes from a history and a church upbringing that doesn't take counseling very seriously, that I didn't know it was a field. And this so that's a funny backstory, but I am very thankful, frankly, that I had opportunities to work as a child and patient advocate in a specialty clinic in the hospital for a few years, because it gave me a lot of context for understanding how parents and children have a hard time interacting, and how predominantly adults don't know how to express their feelings to make their relational connections be more meaningful. And I think that really primed me for being in marriage and family therapy. I learned about attachment theory after I experienced a lot of what I identified in attachment theory. So when I was going through grad school for counseling, we were just introduced to so many ways of thinking to give us options of how to practice. And the number one option that made the most sense to me in first introduction was existentialism, because I think that existentialism is a wonderful bridge for people who are in a secular field of mental health to connect to spirituality. And that was a beautiful opening. I got to learn more about philosophy, but what was really helpful was the introduction of attachment theory that wasn't even part of my school. I think God sent this grad student to our program to introduce us to this concept because it was not part of our training. So I feel almost like a prophet was sent to the people in helping me become aware of something that I didn't know, because the same person who didn't know counseling was an option didn't know the theories that weren't what was exposed to me there. So I feel very, very grateful that this was brought to me, because I wouldn't have known to look for it. But I think that bridging existential theory, where we're thinking about existence, meaning making, requirements of ourselves as we understand stuff in the world and God, and to attachment, how we do anything about that with the people that we are connected to, with the God who is a relational being. Those are just so naturally married to me, that it makes it easy for me to integrate these things therapeutically for people.
Wow.
So what you just said at the end there seems to start the definitional process. Like, what are these things? Thank you. But let me see if I can understand it, because you two big words: existentialism, attachment theory. I guess that's three big words, but two big concepts. If I understood what you just said, is it something like existentialism is the way that's talking about what gives our life purpose, why we exist?
More or less.
Okay. And attachment theory, and this is brand new thought for me. Attachment theory is what we do with that. Can you like unpack how you connected those? Because I missed something.
Oh, sure.
Let me jump in. Sorry, because I actually wanted to get a question in right here at the beginning, because I'm a little bit curious as to how, because what I've learned about attachment theory is like, oh, this makes perfect sense. But this came into the field of counseling and stuff like that through some very interesting experiments, right? And it has then kind of blossomed out of a really narrow scope to something that's bigger. Michaela, do you want to talk a little bit about like how we discovered attachment, at least in an academic way, and how that's been then grown out into something that people have started to use and apply?
Sure. Happy to. So I will acknowledge I am not the expert or the creator of attachment theory, but I'll do my best to represent its history. So, ancient psychology here, we have the introducer of attachment patterns of baby birds to humans, and the attachment of, oh, you must be my mommy, and following people around. And that was patterned to people. This is a behavioral mapping of understanding the world based on who and how we connect to those people. So when the studies were extended to different species, dogs and then people, the findings around people were interesting, but found to need some more understanding. So it was handed off to social psychology. And from behavioral analytical psychology to kind of as the field of psychoanalysis developed from analytics only, it came into kind of a systemic understanding that maybe we don't exist in vacuums. Maybe each man is not just an island. And so understanding this pattern and watching how it shaped something was kind of like a novel idea out of the Greco-Roman understanding of individuality that flourishes so much in Western cultures. So the idea that we are connected to each other and that makes a big difference in each of our lives was then researched and researched and researched. It's one of those obvious things in the world that connection matters, but how it works, why it matters, that's where it bridges for me. But that it matters at all, existential. How it works, attachment theory. Does that make sense?
That's fascinating. Yeah. Brennan, do you have a question? You're thinking, the wheels are turning up here. I see.
Yeah. Before I ask any questions, maybe let's just back up and can you give us the 30,000-foot like beginner's definition? What is attachment theory?
Yeah, let's go. So, sorry if I'm not answering your question in the right order. I'm trying to keep up.
You're doing great.
Zoom way out, eagle eye view. Attachment theory in general is the patterns of connecting to other people. So if you think about attaching, you can think about Velcro, you can think about glue, duct tape, hugs, connecting. And of course, if we're thinking about styles and connecting and how they can work together, that's what attachment theory is all about. It's the ways that connection happens, and when it breaks, what's that like? Is it worth it maybe to get back to connection? If not, why? If so, what do we do about that? And the fun thing about the progression of measurable machinery in the world is that now neuroscience is able to confirm what we already knew and add some base for people who don't know about God or unwilling to understand God for one reason or another, to recognize that it's not just biological mechanisms, that there are evidences that parts of our sensory system and our central nervous system actually only activate when we're interacting with safe people. We are more ourselves when we are interacting with safe people to us. It is beautiful. The attachment theory offers credibility to the human experience in a current social culture that says that people are machines and animals are equal to people. It kind of adds validity to the human experience, I think.
So I think if I'm understanding correctly, like where we sit right now is that what attachment theory is models of how people connect to other people, and then discussions about how that can go, like understanding how that can also go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then what the last thing you just said sounds like it's a lot about, yes, we're discovering that this is, it's deep within our even biology, but I guess what I'm hearing from that is, in this context, is what we're saying is attachment really, like how we connect to other human beings in our world, really matters for human health. And perhaps like we didn't give that enough attention in earlier theories of psychology or theories of health. And now we're realizing, which I always feel this way about psychology. Like, it seems like every big insight that psychology has is this big duh moment. Like everybody's like, well, yeah, we already knew that. And we didn't know that. We sort of knew it, but that's something, I guess that's a sign of it being, there's something good happening because we're discovering things that are deep and long and true that have been true forever, and now we can just articulate them better. But point being, attachment theory is saying, yes, it matters how we connect to other human beings for health, for families. It's super critical to our survival. And here's some ways that we can describe the ways that works and can go wrong. Is that a good definition or a good place to start for sort of?
Yes, I think that sounds great. I think that to be understanding that it's always been there, these things are deep as the human experience goes longer even than human experience, because God existed and connected to himself well before we were made, and that this stuff matters. Also, I think it's helpful in the same way that sometimes we don't know what things are until people give us words for them. I think what's funny about common sense is what's happening here too, where common sense is only common once it's shared. And once you hear something that's common sense, you're like, yeah, oh, duh. Yes. And I think attachment theory is so straightforward about basic human pattern that many people brush it off. But things that are obvious still matter. They're still part of the real world. And so as we think about this, I hope that everyone who's listening can just learn some words to help identify, what are my attacks? Why do I resist those sometimes? Why might other people resist me sometimes, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a really good summation. And I really liked your point about common sense is only common once it's shared. That I'm stealing that because that's profound, actually. So the way I was like, my first introduction to attachment theory was this experiment that was done where they had mothers with their infants or infant to top, like very young babies come in, and they would have this, and I'm not exactly sure the details of this experiment, but basically they observe the baby. The mother would bring the baby in with the researcher or something, and then would, find a reason to leave the room or something. And what they identified was this sense of some of these babies were insecure in that moment, and some of them exhibited behaviors that made the researcher think, oh, well, they're secure. And that's sort of like this idea of like, oh, some people, and it gets into the broader idea of what security versus insecurity is like, but the implications of that, of like, oh, there are far-reaching implications about your level of security in yourself and with others that affect your behavior in the world, even when you're not connected with it, right? So do I have that right?
If you, if anyone watching wants to go look and see what he's talking about, or what specifically Matt is talking about, sorry, we'll use names here. I apologize. I think the name of that experience is called the Sad Child Project, or a Sad Child Experience. And what people were measuring in that research study was the acknowledged marked difference between some kids who were comfortable with their mom leaving the room and expecting her to come back, and other kids who were frantic or scared or sad when mom went away, and it seemed like they weren't comfortable, couldn't be sure that mom was going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And with that sensation of distance or separation, by can't see her anymore, she's not here, also showed capacity or willingness to play or to eat or to do anything else. And crying, laughing, all of these were depending on the, showed up later, the comfortability the child had that mom was going to return and pay attention to their needs.
And so one of the things that in response to that I get from what I understand, people have kind of expanded on and started to realize is that going into later stages in life, those people who don't have any kind of secure attachment exhibit all of these there's patterns in their life that are unhealthy, right? I mean, there's a lot of times people who can be identified as having an insecure attachment are at risk for all sorts of health things, acting out in just self-destructive ways. I mean, do you want to just share a little bit about like what? So what? Who needs secure attachment? I don't need secure attachment. I'm fine. What are some of the things that people who don't have secure attachment live with?
Well, first, I'm just going to call out the last thing you were making an example of there. Everyone needs secure attachment. That's the answer to that question. Every one of us. The reason I can say that with such overt confidence is that when we lack secure attachment, not to every single person we have, but when we're not feeling a stable connection to humanity at large, where we expect people to treat us with respect, where we expect the world to show response to our needs, we seclude, isolate, we develop self-fulfilling prophecies where we decide that something is going to happen and then act as though it's already happened, and then end up finding out that we confirm our original suspicion of things that are like keeping jobs or maintaining romantic partnerships or any goals that you set, and you decide that you're not worthy because people don't pay attention to you, so it doesn't matter anyway. You won't move towards good things in the future because you've decided those aren't for me anyway. So there are some expectations that develop around the world that is based on expectation of I can develop a stable connection or I can't develop a stable connection that touch everything. In our physical bodies, the way that maps out is tension, the shutdown of half of the sympathetic and parasympathetic system of your central nervous system. So that means that sometimes in normal people language, that your digestion and the reoxygenation of your blood is paused for longer than is normal, which builds up health problems. So when we're talking about this, we're acknowledging stress over a long period of time deteriorates cells, blood vessel linings, nerve tissues. I mean, our bodies break down when we don't have secure attachment because it's perceived as danger.
Okay.
Whether we like it or not, our bodies perceive lack of connection as danger.
Well, it is. I mean, it is danger. You know, I mean, like it's perceiving it accurately.
Mm-hmm. That's funny, actually. Our bodies almost always perceive things accurately.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
Wow.
that seems to me to be that's just such the perfect connection to talking about God and our relationship with God. I'm thinking of that child whose mother leaves the room and feels very insecure and starts to perceive this moment as danger. And just to unpack that really briefly, if she left the room and there was actually no certainty that she was going to come back, that is danger. That's why he perceives it that way. I mean, like, that's really dangerous. They die because their caregiver doesn't come back. Michaela, so many people that I speak to, I myself feel that God has left the room and there's no certainty that he's coming back. Right? And I think that's to me the connection.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the question here is other than maybe can you speak to, I don't know, can you speak to that? Does that spark something for you? I'm just seeing that it's like what we're saying is if you feel like God's not coming back or God doesn't exist or God doesn't care, that's a real issue.
Mm-hmm. It is a real issue. Unapologetically, it's a real issue. But I think what's so sweet is that some scriptures from John are coming to mind here that are offering me comfort. So in the face of what you are acknowledging, which is absolutely the case, I think it would be probably untrue of any person to say they've never thought God might not be there, or God might not be listening, or God might not care, or I think we understand the theme here. But the comfort I'm getting from scripture here is that Jesus promised that when he went away, the Father would send the helper, and the helper would comfort and communicate truth and bring to remembrance in our souls the things that Jesus said, the words of life that can sustain us. And I think that recognizing the constant presence of the Spirit of God, who is named Comforter, helps me personally when I am confronted with those thoughts and accusations against God's goodness, and offers me some stability in the face of maybe divine hoodiness is what I think I'm experiencing.
Yeah, amen. I think my internal skeptic sort of immediately responds, and I'm not trying to, this is not an attack or anything. It's just sort of speaking for some people I know, right? It's like, that's wonderful for you. If I may, though, let me like kind of connect it to, if I'm one of those people who hear what you just said, and I acknowledge I want that to be true. In keeping with this idea of articulating, can you help me understand what are some of the reasons like I might struggle? Like these are connected, right? Like if I had, this is why we now talk about if you struggled with your dad as a kid, it makes sense that you would struggle with God as a father. Or if you struggled with feeling like your mother was going to come back into the room, it makes sense that this Jesus saying, I've sent the comforter, you're like, really? Right? Am I onto it there?
Yeah. I think if we find God untrustworthy, the things he says won't make us feel confident.
Yes. Say more about that, please.
I mean, I think just at simple level, if we think people are liars, we don't take their words seriously. If we think that people maybe aren't liars, but aren't good to their word, we don't take their promises as promises. We think, oh, we'll see if that works out. And our experience of people that we see shapes our understanding of God more than we would like it to be the case, I think. And so the ways that we can not trust is either to have maybe spiritual abuse, where you think the person who represents God has been horrid to you or people that you care about. And now you're thinking, if that person represents God, then I don't want any part of that. Or you might have a really unfortunate piece of relational trauma in your history that taints your willingness to expect good with endurance anymore. And you're just going to wait and see if people are good to their intentions. And there can be a lot of things that break trust, but those are just some examples that I know happen to people.
And I'm here, I guess what I'm hearing is, one, just sort of like, it's okay that that translates to your experience, your expectations around God, right? Like,
Makes sense, even.
yeah. If I don't feel like I can trust the people that are closest to me in my life, or the people who I was told I should be able to trust, for whatever reason that I've had that break, it's like, yeah, it would be really hard to then trust God.
I think when any of us to God as the images of God that we are, we do damage directly to how people can see God.
Hmm.
And it is a sobering and humbling fact that when people are poor representatives of God, how else can people know except what they've been shown?
And I think the thing that sticks out to me in what y'all just talked about there was the grace and the acknowledgement that it's for people who have a strained relationship with God. It's almost like an understanding. Well, sure, if I went through that, I would probably have that too. And it's an acknowledgement that, you know what, that is a hard thing. And it almost gives a little bit of relief to this idea that sometimes we have in our subconscious that says, well, obviously you're the problem in your relationship with God. It's all your fault. And if you could just get your act together, you would have a beautiful spiritual life. But there's this, but whenever we bring this in, there's an understanding of like, actually, we have a lot of healing that needs to happen in order for us to get to a place where we have a healthy relationship with God, because we've been hurt in a very real way.
And it seems to me that we can universalize this so easily. Everybody's been hurt. Like the break, the bond of trust between us and God has been broken on a cosmic scale. Like, this is how I read the story of the fall to a large extent. The real temptation, if you want to call it that, the real lie, one of the real lies, I'll say it that way, that Satan introduced to us was that, you really can't trust him. He's actually trying to hurt you, not help you, which is the fundamental attachment break, right? Like, mom doesn't love me. She wants to use me or leave me or hurt me or whatever. And sometimes in this life, that actually happens. Moms do that, in an abusive situation. That's horrible. But like, on a cosmic level, we're all in this place where we're not entirely sure that God is trustworthy, because that has been, the world is really, reinforcing that on every level. And Satan would love that to be the way we understand God constantly. Go ahead, Michaela. I was going to ask you to kind of make the turn. Like, the question I'm dying to ask is like, okay, so what do I do about it? How do I fix it?
Yeah. I think to acknowledge is the first start of change. So let's just sit here and acknowledge together that when something is wrong, is out of alignment, you have to know what's wrong to do anything about it. And so I think just acknowledging, oh, maybe the way I've been blaming myself can change. Or maybe the way I've been over-identifying God by human behavior can change. And if we are humble about the ideas that we hold, then we can change our minds a lot more easily than if we are rigid about the ideas that we hold. And so with gentleness, I think, is the way that we start to change this, where we recognize we all believe and do things for reasons. And so if something's going to change, we have to be willing to address the reason and just abandon it and pick a new reason. And so it starts at willingness to be open, which is a wildly vulnerable thing to do. And so it takes profound courage, but you have to have a vision that is worth it to you before any of this can really happen.
Wow.
Well, I think the vision of that is secure attachment. Go ahead.
Well, sure. Well, that's a perfect example of, we've talked a little bit about like what happens when a person has all this insecurity, right? And you talked about everything from just being withdrawn to actually having physiological things in your body not functioning properly, right? Well, let's look at the flip side. What is on offer here? What does having secure attachment bring into your life? Like, what's the good? What's the flip side?
I wish I had the technological capacity to show a video of a flower blooming into a full bloom. That is what attachment offers. It is an option in secure attachment that things that are in already have a chance to flourish and to expand and experience and function. So to ground that in normal language here, what I think is important to know about secure attachment is that it is kind of like what you think life should be like in reality, where you are not afraid of people, where you are not afraid of future, where you are content in your experiences, where you're curious and the world hasn't pummeled out your open-mindedness or curiosity. effectively. And your desires you're willing to pursue because you don't expect them to be crushed by people who won't support you. And you've got capacity in your body to wait and not feel anxiety in the stillness. And you have a confidence about your identity that makes you willing to do things and enter rooms without having to wonder what people are thinking about you. It's just a natural way of being that is not overrun by fear,
Wow, man.
in short.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sometimes I've asked myself and others, it's like, can you imagine what life would be like if you were free of all these limitations that you carry around all the time? And that's a hard thing to imagine, but boy, you start down that path and it starts sounding like the list you just made. And I go, I really would like that. Yeah, one thing I picked up on, Michaela, that I wonder about is it's so interesting to me that it seems like the psychological world is there's the pop psychology. This is not the real psychology, right? There's the pop psychology that's sort of love yourself. It's a weird kind of isolating around my own identity, like securing myself. And what I hear you saying and what I hear this theory saying is very much what I hear Scripture saying, which is I don't need to worry about what other people think about me. I don't need to worry about my hopes being dashed. I don't need to worry about my identity being denied because somebody exterior to me is securing that for me. Like it's secure with that person. And when that person is God, that's a pretty powerful security.
It really is. I'm going to give an anecdote from my own life here to help bridge the understanding for people who maybe never have experienced a way to perceive secure attachment, even. What would that even look like? So I can be incredibly thankful here that my parents were very helpful in helping me understand that they cared about me, that my needs were important to them, and that I was a valuable person in the family. And so I can acknowledge that is not everyone's experience. That is not most people's experience. That is few people's experience. But it's out there in the world. And so I can talk about it because it really happened. And an example based in this context is the fact that I was born with a speech impediment. I've had surgeries and speech therapy since, but I sounded really hard to understand through elementary school, and I was ruthlessly bullied for it. And on the bus was the worst. The people who were the most willing with the least amount of adult supervision to be their full extent of adolescent unkindness were riding the bus with me. And so I would be crying walking home from the bus. But by the time I got home, I was happy again because I knew at home I was safe. At home, they tried to understand me. At home, my thoughts mattered enough to wait and figure out what I was saying. And it was a special acknowledgement that though they slay me, yet I can trust you, is this principle here where people might abandon me, but I was securely attached to the people who matter to me, so they can go to their houses and I can have to face them when I have to face them next. They're right here. This is my safe zone. And I carry that enough with me that my identity didn't shift when I was bullied because I was so sure from the secure attachment here, from the people who I knew were supposed to take care of me. And that can translate directly to how we understand God, who is supposed to take care of us. If we have a willingness to lean into his goodness, there is the capacity to receive his goodness. And then the things that we experience rather in the chaos of our human existence in this fallen world will affect us, absolutely, but don't have to shake us from our understanding of the whole world at the same time.
So what are what's a practical step for me asking the question, I want to be willing to lean into his goodness?
Mm-hmm.
What's your advice?
Mm-hmm. I think what's the most uncomfortable part of change in attachment styles. Because it's just styles, nobody's stuck to the way they attach, thankfully. And is having to be vulnerable to potential risk in trying to connect differently. And that is what my professional advice is about willingness to change your approach to God is the vulnerability required to open your heart or your mind to the fact that maybe you're understanding God wrong. And maybe you can ask, if you're willing to try to connect to him differently, you can ask him to reveal himself to you, or to send people to you who can be better examples of him for you to be able to even start to get closer to him.
Yeah, I amen. I would like to just like return, just for people I know listening, to that kind of compassionate statement of, it is so hard, and I get it, to be willing to acknowledge that maybe I'm understanding God wrong. You know, you're not saying this, I know. I just know how easy it is for me to hear that as, well, it's easy, just do it. And it's like, no, that is wicked hard, and I get that. And yet at the same time, my own experience with it is exactly that I didn't even really I didn't even know I was thinking about God in a certain way or feeling about God in a certain way until somebody brought it to my attention and had kind of led me through a little exercise. It's actually something we do at our retreats just to kind of get open the possibility of the idea that there are other ways to think and feel about God. And boy, that's, I'll be honest, and Michaela, this is my next question. Like, I think had I been left just with that, I would have felt a little lost. I would have been like, oh, I'm feeling about God wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Not wrong. I'm feeling about God in a particular way that is affecting my relationship with him negatively. So, okay, good. What next then? What do I do?
I think to go in order matters. So I'm hearing that the first step is never the complete process, and the second step's frustratingly not all the complete process. So in this, now acknowledging and being willing to consider an edit to my belief system, which is a wild big ask. And then we have to envision, what are we willing to see be different? Because until we acknowledge that something needs to change, we don't care if something changes. And once it's woken up inside of us that something gotta give, I'm just gotta give. Am I willing for any part of me to change? If I'm really taking a hard, honest, vulnerable stock of myself here, and okay, we're thinking about that. We're taking extra deep breaths because we need them. And then we're moving into, all right, well, if I am willing, still tentatively, what would I be willing to reach towards? What would I be willing to hope for? And this is where we have to talk about why hope feels hard. And honor all the reasons that hope feels hard. Because trust has been broken and expectation follows what we have seen, and expectations, side note, are the reason that we pursue anything we pursue, and are the reason that we experience the emotions that we do. It's all based around their expectations. All of it. And so when we recognize that our expectations have been set because of painful circumstances, it is valuable to validate the painful circumstances and then to contain them to their own area of wound and try to be careful and vigilant not to generalize them outside of the lines of that wound, because the single hardest thing to do when you're afraid that you might be hurt or abandoned is to move out into something that feels painful and scary. But if you recognize that the painful and scary is only part of what already happened, and you can't be sure that's part of what's coming up, it's not fair to just assume it will be painful and scary. And that is a deep emotional process. But I'm acknowledging from the bird's eye view here, that's what we go through to be able to get towards trust.
That makes me think of a very personal experience of a mentor. I'm not sure what phrase to use for this person in my life, but there was a point in my life where this person basically asked me to trust him in this process of change that I was going through. And, my honest physical, mental response was hell no. Like, I am not, because it was touching such a deep part of me that had been wounded so badly. And I can only say this now. At the time, all I knew was, no, not going to trust anybody with this. And he was very gentle and very kind. And the way he described it was something that just, what you just said just brought to my mind. He says, I know that what I'm asking you to do feels like asking you to step in a room where there is no floor and you're going to fall forever. I know that's what it feels like. I just would ask you to look at me and look at the other people in the room and notice that they're dancing. So just because you can't see the floor, just notice that other people are dancing. And that was a shift for me. It was like something in me, I think it's what you're saying there. It was like something in me gave me this, it was a vision of what I want. I would really like to be in that room with him dancing. I'd like to be in that room with those other people having a good time. But I had to get past this like misperception about my expectation of what was going to happen. And the only thing for it, and this may not be universal, but for me, the only thing for it was what he said to me, was just, he basically said, this is all metaphorical. I hope people understand that. But he basically said to me, you just take my hand, trust me. I'm going to go into the room. You're not going to fall, because if the floor's not there and you're right, that's okay. I'll be holding on to you. And I mean, I get teary just thinking about this experience. And then I did it. And that changed everything for me, because, it was like, I risked the trust. I risked believing and discovered, lo and behold, there's a floor and you can dance on it and there's life. So I don't know. That was my personal experience of that.
I'm willing to share a personal experience of that too, because I really think it matters that we don't just talk about ideas. These ideas reflect reality. And explain reality. So in acknowledgement of attachment styles, they can change. They are different based on different types of relationships even. So I still securely attached to my mom. We lost my dad 10 years ago, but the relationship with my mom is still lovely. And I experienced relational abuse. And so partnering romantically was really hard for me. And my now husband said a wonderfully revelatory thing to me that I didn't know I needed to hear when we were seriously dating before we got married. He said, you don't have to trust husbands at large or men at large. You just need to trust me. And that was easy to do. I did trust him. So it made the leap into marriage something I could do, because I stopped doing what I said we all have to stop doing, in generalizing the pain out of one person's atrocity to another person's wonderful fidelity and care for my needs, and etc. So if we cut the fabric around each individual point of pain, each pain deserves its own validation and its comfort, but it doesn't deserve to overreach its own experience, because then it steals from everything else. And it keeps us from experiencing the fullness of all of the joys and the uniqueness and the interesting parts of the rest of life. And I think those are lovely and worth preserving.
It occurs to me how much what we've been talking about has echoes of what I've come to learn about recovery ministry, and this essential component of healing from the past and not living in the wounds. I mean, you said it, Michaela, not living in the wounds of the past, and being stuck there, but acknowledging and coming to realize that what's on offer is healing and a way forward and a way out. I mean, the imagery that I keep coming back to is this idea of, we are all orphans in this world until we accept our adoption through Jesus Christ to the Father. And you think about that idea of like, oh, wow, I can leave behind the mean streets and I can lay down all of my defenses and I can shed these ratty, dirty clothes that I've fished out of the garbage in trying to just survive. And I can go to a place of thriving and flourishing, where all of my needs are provided for and I'm deeply loved. Wow.
Wow. You know, Matt, I just realized we have all, or maybe Brendan, I can't remember if you used this word. I was going to say we've all used this word today. I know Matt and I have used the word thrive. And thrive is a word that may have fallen out of the working vocabulary of many people watching or listening. Because once a person has experienced multiple or even one significant point of distress, thriving falls off the radar. And so as a vision of what you might expect that could still be out there in the world, thriving still happens. Thriving is an option available to humans. We can connect. We can experience safety. We can. And you can believe me or not, but it kind of, it's just, it comes down to our expectations here again. And I guess I want to raise this, connects to me something I think is really helpful here, drilled into us in my family therapy training, that relational wounds or wounds that we get in relationships have to be healed in relationships. It's a style of wound. It has to be healed in the same vein. And so if we experience relationship problems, we have to heal those expectations of relationships with new helpful experiences in relationships. That is a wildly vulnerable, frustrating thing. And it's part of why pop psychology has made it so individually secure yourself, is because it requires the willingness to keep connecting anyway, to receive the healing we need.
So we are certainly drawing near to the end of our time. And Michaela, I thank you for taking this much time with us. I want to throw kind of one question that's been nagging at me for a little while at you, and it's relatively big, so hopefully I don't impinge too much on your time. But it's something like everything. This is making so much sense to me as being, and I hope listeners are hearing it even as just, maybe it's just the opportunity to imagine that things could be different with God is kind of what I want to say. And maybe just take a little bit of comfort that someone out there has had a different experience with God. So it's at least possible. But the nagging question I struggle with is, it seems like my attachment with God is this one of the struggles that is so different and unique about it with God is that he is essentially non-physical. Now I have questions about that, but my point is that this is the experience that I think we all have. I can understand what it would look like, even if I can't do it, to heal my attachment problems with my mother or with my wife or with whatever. Because I can go talk to them and they maybe could heal and respond differently, or etc.
I see your
Do you see where I'm going?
Yes, I do. Oh, gesticulation is working. Okay.
Yeah. People who are not watching, I'm just going to go and,
Yeah. So what I recognize is that the issue at surface level only seems impossible. How then, if you have to connect anyway in the ways that you understand connecting, If someone is non-material, what do you do about that? How can they change? Oh my gosh. Okay. Thankfully, there's some subterranean context here that can help us out. So, recognizing attachment theory as a developing science, attachment styles as temporary, constantly working models of how we see the world, and the change is not only in physical interactions, because attachment style includes a lot more about big picture that comes from small interactions. It's not about small interactions. So what people have found over time is that a capacity to be in the same space or look at the faces of, or etc., is the most immediately globally registered kind of connection. But people who have lost loved ones can still heal relationships with them on their side of things after death by the mental adjustment of how they see the people. So the way we mentally regard the people we connect to, maybe someone has gone on a sailing boat across the world and not available by phone for months at a time, and you don't see them. The way that you regard the person while they're not there impacts how you feel about your connection. And so when we are thinking about God, who is kind of permanently on that sailboat, and we're thinking of that, the way that we connect is we don't have to see or hear or experience the presence of, though God does evidently reveal himself in those ways to some people. Thank God he does. But we don't need all of those things. We can actually, to your example of your mentor, Brandon, choose to trust and see what happens in outcomes, in adjustments to how we perceive the words of scripture or any liturgies that we encounter, and the ways that we notice our own thoughts. We can start to challenge our thoughts and choose, right? Oh, actually, I don't know if I want to just expect God not to be there for me. And in defense of the potential goodness of God, you can start to change the way that you regard him. And then your hypotheses of perhaps he's not as awful as I thought can be worked out over time. Does that help? Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. I think one of made me think of two things. First, I promise this is not shameless self-promotion. It's shameful self-promotion. No. One, actually, this was like the central point of the exploration I did with connection of attachment theory and liturgy, church. That, because in one sense, the answer I want to give to the question is try it and see. Test God and see. We're not supposed to test God in that negative sense, but
taste and see that the Lord is good.
Exactly. Like God, there is a sense that I want to acknowledge that yes, God is permanently on that boat, but there's a whole nother sense that you said at the very beginning, Michaela, and it is that the Comforter is here. Jesus said, "I'm going away and sending you the Spirit." God is not leaving. I am with you always. And I want to make the bold claim that that's actually testable. Like, it's not just theory. It's not a nice statement. God actually is present and active. You can't make him do stuff, but you can certainly experience him. And I'm not going to say much more than that. But anyway, amen. Like, both sides of that to me are true. One, we've got to wrap up. I'm sorry. But I guess let me ask it this way, because I'd love to hear your thought on this. Being willing to change the way I regard God, like sticking with that analogy of my partner who's on the boat away, I can heal just by changing the way I regard them. Would you agree, or do you feel like it's connected, that in the case of God, changing the way I regard God makes it more possible for me to notice the actual things he's doing? Does that make sense? It's like part of the reason I don't notice God's presence is because I'm sort of refusing to. I'm afraid to.
Makes a lot of sense. Some phrasing in the world of mental health around that is confirmation bias. And this circles back to the point I've been making. I feel like a little bit like a broken record here around this word here, but expectation drive our behavior. And so if we think that God will be a way, we're not going to move that way. And if we are not sure, but we're curious, then it's safer to investigate that. If we are not sure, but we're willing to dart in and check, there's room to learn and grow. But if we rigidly hold our beliefs about God's unsafety, there's no way to change that. If we flexibly hold our beliefs about God's unsafety, we have room to change that.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a fair summary then for those who are listening and watching? One, we get it. This is hard stuff. And two, maybe this is an invitation to just question whether you're willing to regard God differently. If nothing else, can we just maybe maybe this podcast was a message from God? Maybe it's an opportunity for you to say, maybe I'm just willing to think slightly different about God. And if so, where might you push forward in that? Where might you dart in? And just take a little test. Might I recommend, hey, therapy is a great place to start. Spiritual direction is a great place to start. Just finding a good friend to just dart in and talk about this is a great place to start. But maybe just being willing is enough as well. Michaela, before we go, is there, we didn't say who you work with, where you're from. Could you please tell us a little bit of that? I need to, link you in the show notes so people can find you if they want to and things like that.
Sure. Well, thank you both again for having me today. It's really been an honor to connect to Signpost in today. It's been very sweet to talk about these concepts. Usually, people will find me with Meier Clinics in Richardson, Texas. I am an LPC there, and I co-host the podcast Meier Clinics that is able to be found on almost everywhere there shows a podcast, thankfully, these days. So I talk with Dr. Paul Meier most often, and sometimes some other counselors about concepts in therapy and concepts in relationships. And we talked about shame and worldviews and codependency and, the stuff that people are interested in. Or maybe not. It's okay.
That's awesome.
This is the best place to get to.
Awesome. So, and listeners will link to all those things. And I wish I had said that at the beginning. I mean, it doesn't really matter when I say it, but the Meier Clinic podcast is fantastic. Love it. So thank you for doing that.
I'm so glad that you're finding it helpful in any way, actually. That's great feedback. Thanks.
Yes. No, I enjoy it thoroughly. It's listeners, this is just the way I listen to podcasts. It's the kind of podcast that for me, I kind of scroll through the backlog and just I don't listen to every episode in order. I just sort of scroll. I'm like, ooh, that sounds interesting. And then it sort of sparks this 2-week long obsession with some topic. I appreciate that very much. It's the way I love my podcasts anyway. So thank you for doing it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your work. We are just so grateful that you would come and talk to us. So, listeners, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Questions you may have, thoughts you may have about this or any other episode. And also, if you would be so kind as to go and give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you're listening, just click 5 stars because this was worth it, and tell people why you loved it. That would help us a lot. Thank you, and may the grace of Christ go with you wherever the road takes you.
Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is a production of Signpost Inn Ministries. a nonprofit Christian ministry dedicated to strengthening people's relationship with Jesus and walking with them compassionately on their life's journey. We offer spiritual direction, retreats, and lots of other resources like this podcast. Please visit us at signpostn.org to learn more. We especially want to thank our generous donors who support our work and keep this podcast going. If you've benefited from something you've heard, please consider supporting us by making a tax-deductible gift at signpostn.org/donate. We also want to thank Rex Daugherty for creating the original theme music for this podcast. You can check out more of his work at his website, and you can find all the links in our show notes.